Today, we dive into a nightmare that should never exist. Imagine the Warmaster, Horus Lupercal, not serving chaos, but awakening the Necrons instead. The tomb worlds stir, metallic gods rise, and the Emperor's light begins to fade. This is not a battle for the throne, it's the extinction of mankind, led by the son who was never meant to return. So hit like, subscribe, and prepare for the impossible. Because today, we ask, what if Horus joined the Necrons against the Imperium? Horus did not fall to chaos. In this twisted vision of the galaxy, the Warmaster never reached the Eye of Terror, never gazed upon the madness of the warp, and never heard the whispers of the ruinous powers. Instead, his path took him to a world long forgotten, a dead sphere buried beneath layers of ash and silence. The world pulsed faintly with unnatural energy, a heartbeat from an age before humanity had ever walked the stars. There, in the shadows of cyclopean structures carved from black metal, Horus found what should have remained lost forever, a Necron tomb world. At first, he believed it to be a remnant of some Mechanicus experiment, a relic of ancient science. The halls were endless, carved with alien precision, each surface cold and humming with restrained power. His breath fogged as he descended deeper, his legion following in uneasy silence. There were no spirits here, no demons, no psychic echo, only the perfect stillness of death refined into machine. Every step felt like an intrusion upon eternity. And then, the sarcophagi began to open. Metallic forms rose from the tombs, eyes igniting with the sickly green light of undying logic. The sons of Horus raised their bolters, but Horus raised his hand. He could sense something within the awakening constructs, a kind of purpose that was utterly alien, but also disturbingly familiar. The Necrons did not rush to attack. They simply stood, ranks upon ranks of mechanical immortals, regarding the intruders with cold, precise indifference. It was not hostility that filled the air, but calculation. They were measuring him. The largest of them stepped forward, a towering figure of living metal crowned with a halo of crackling energy. It did not speak with words, but with impulses that tore through the mind like the grinding of ancient machinery. Horus felt its thoughts, clear and sharp as glass. You are not of the warp. You are flesh, but you are untainted. That alien intelligence probed his essence, searching for corruption and finding none. The Necron overlord understood that Horus, unlike his father, unlike his brothers, was something it could negotiate with. For Horus, the moment was a revelation. He had seen too much of the Emperor's deception, had heard whispers of the truth buried beneath the Imperial creed, that humanity's god was no god at all, only a tyrant cloaked in light. Here, before him, stood beings who had long ago achieved what the Emperor sought, the end of weakness, the death of mortality. They had transcended the curse of flesh. The Necrons offered not faith, not devotion, but certainty. Their silence was not ignorance, it was peace. As hours turned to days, Horus learned from them. He was shown visions of the ancient wars, the biotransference that had turned living empires into eternal machines. He saw the war in heaven, where gods were slain by logic and physics alone. The Necrons had destroyed their own souls willingly to gain control over all matter. It was horrifying, yes, but it was also pure. There was no chaos in them, no corruption, no madness born of the immaterium. They had escaped it. And Horus, weary of the endless manipulations of the warp, began to understand the beauty of that silence. In the cold glow of their tombs, the Warmaster began to see another future for mankind, one without faith, without suffering, without lies. The Emperor's dream of a psychic humanity had doomed his species to the eternal prey for the demons of the warp. Horus imagined a different destiny, a humanity reforged in metal and code, liberated from chaos forever. The Necron overlords promised him this. They would show him the science of immortality, the architecture of obedience, the logic that could reshape a galaxy. In return, he would offer them what they lacked, will, ambition, the drive to command once more. Their alliance was sealed not in blood, but in silence. When Horus touched the metallic hand of the Necron leader, an exchange occurred, not of words, but of understanding. The Necrons recognized in him a conqueror's intellect. He recognized in them the tools to annihilate gods. From that moment on, his destiny was rewritten. No longer the servant of chaos, no longer the son seeking to overthrow his father in madness, Horus became the harbinger of a new order. When he returned to his fleet, the change was already visible. The green glow of Necron technology pulsed within his armor, and his voice carried a strange resonance, cold, commanding, mechanical in its precision. His legionaries felt it too. The whispers of the warp around them grew quiet, as if silenced by an unseen power. The ships of the sons of Horus no longer shimmered with the corrupt energies of chaos, but hummed with alien symmetry. Word spread across the stars of a Warmaster reborn, not possessed, not corrupted, but enlightened. The Imperium did not understand the danger. They believed him dead or fallen into the warp, but what had emerged was far worse than any demon prince. Horus now commanded the power to unmake reality itself, the perfect fusion of human ambition and Necron science. In secret, the tomb worlds stirred under his command. Entire sectors of the galaxy fell silent, their suns dimmed by mechanical shrouds. Millions of human worlds simply vanished from Imperial records, consumed by metallic armies that moved without sound, without mercy. The Mechanicus tried to interpret the signals, to understand the technology, but it was beyond even their sacred logic. What Horus and the Necrons had begun was not a war, it was an evolution. The galaxy trembled as the Emperor felt a disturbance unlike any before. It was not warp-based, not demonic. It was the opposite, an emptiness spreading, a psychic silence devouring light and life. For the first time, he could not see into the future. Horus had stepped outside the domain of gods. The alliance of Horus and the Necrons marked the death of all faith. The Imperium's prayers echoed into a void that no longer listened. The Warmaster had found the ultimate weapon, not destruction, but stillness. And in that stillness, the dream of the Emperor began to decay, one world at a time. Horus stood within the heart of the tomb world, surrounded by a silence so complete, it felt like the universe itself was holding its breath. Before him, 1,000 Necron warriors stood immobile, statues of metal perfection. Their cold, jade light reflected off his armor, painting the once proud Warmaster in the colors of decay and logic. Here, beneath the planet's crust, in halls older than the stars themselves, the meeting between the fallen son of humanity and the undying rulers of death was about to begin. The Necron overlords regarded him not as prey, not as an intruder, but as an anomaly, a being of flesh untouched by the warp, guided not by chaos, but by thought. Horus felt the weight of their gaze, each one a mind that had witnessed the death of sons, the extinction of empires, and the fading of gods. They did not hate. They simply measured. And in their measurement, they found something valuable: purpose. The lead overlord stepped forward, its form impossibly tall, every movement precise and without hesitation. Emerald light flickered through its eyes as it studied Horus. The air between them shimmered with unseen energy. When the being finally spoke, it was not with sound but with an intrusion. A voice inside Horus's skull, ancient and mechanical, cold and absolute. You are flesh, yet untainted. You lead, yet you are enslaved. Why do you kneel to a god of dust and lies? The words struck deeper than any blade. For a brief instant, Horus saw through the illusion of faith, through the Emperor's shining mask of divinity. The Necron's question tore open the very doubts that had always haunted him. Was his father truly the savior of mankind, or merely another tyrant clutching at eternity? The Overlord did not need to press further. Horus's silence was enough. It sensed his unrest and continued, its mind voice vibrating through the metal halls. The gods you serve are parasites. The warp feeds on your kind. We offer freedom from gods, from chaos, from weakness. Horus stared into the Overlord's expressionless faceplate and saw his own reflection. Distorted, ghostly, hollow. The truth was there, hidden in that mirrored mask. The Imperium had fought for 10,000 years to escape the darkness of ignorance, yet it had become enslaved by faith, by fear, by the Emperor's demand for obedience. The Necrons, soulless and cruel as they were, had achieved the one thing mankind never could. They had escaped the chains of the warp. They had silenced the screaming madness that haunted existence. In them, Horus saw not monsters, but survivors. Horus took a slow step forward. The Overlord tilted its head, studying the human warlord. There was recognition in that mechanical gesture, an acknowledgement of equality. Horus felt it too. Though he was mortal and the Overlord was machine, they were both generals of extinction, both architects of empires. But where Horus's world burned in faith and betrayal, the Necron's world was built upon order so absolute it defied imagination. Then, the Overlord extended its hand. A gesture both alien and strangely familiar. Horus hesitated only for a moment before placing his gaunted palm upon the cold surface. A surge of data, thoughts, memories, histories, flooded into his mind. He saw visions of a time before mankind had even crawled from its oceans. He saw civilizations spanning galaxies, beings made of living metal tearing apart gods of energy and flame. He saw the betrayal of the Khan, the curse of immortality, and the long sleep that followed. Every image was carved into his mind with surgical precision. When the visions faded, Horus found himself trembling. The Necron's voice returned, steady and sharp. We remember the war in heaven. We remember the fall of gods. You, son of the false Emperor, carry their shadow. You can end what they began. The Overlord's eyes flared brighter, and its tone grew colder. Join us, and together we will erase the corruption that consumes your species. You will command not flesh, but perfection. He turned to his legion. The air was heavy with smoke and flickering green light. The sons of Horus looked to their master, their eyes questioning, desperate for command. Horus raised his hand, not to signal attack, but to silence them. The decision had already been made. His path was no longer that of vengeance or redemption. It was evolution. The Overlords bowed their heads slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement, not reverence. In that moment, Horus became something new, the bridge between mortality and the machine, between rebellion and logic. The deal was not sealed in blood, but in understanding. The Necrons would offer their science, their armies, their indifference to gods. Horus would offer his strategy, his will, his purpose. He did not smile. He did not kneel. He simply whispered the words that would define the galaxy's end. The Imperium will know silence. The Emperor sat upon the golden throne, the silent engine of his immortality humming faintly beneath the endless layers of machinery. For 10,000 years, that sound had been the pulse of the Imperium, steady, defiant, unyielding. But now, in this dark imagining, something within that hum faltered. A note of unease rippled through the immaterium itself. Deep within the psychic sea, the light of the Astronomicon flickered, dimmed for the briefest moment, not from demonic interference, but from something far more unsettling: silence. The Emperor's mind stretched across the galaxy as it always had, touching countless worlds, feeling every prayer, every psychic tremor, every breath of devotion. But now, entire sectors had gone dark, not destroyed, not corrupted, simply gone quiet. No warp storms, no demonic resonance, no cries for help. Just absence. It was an impossibility, an absence even chaos could not explain. In that void of noise, the Emperor felt something he had not known in ages: fear. His thoughts turned instinctively toward his lost son, Horus. The name was a wound that had never healed, a scar carved into eternity. But even that pain had always burned with energy, with fury. Now it was cold. It was still. The psychic echo that had once screamed through the warp had vanished. It was not death. It was something worse, erasure. Horus no longer existed in the psychic realm. For a being as powerful as the Emperor, such disappearance was beyond comprehension. The custodians around the throne did not see the change. To them, their god-king remained as still as stone, eyes closed, golden armor radiant. But within the blinding radiance of his mind, a storm of disbelief gathered. His connection to the warp, the very source of his dominance, found nothing where his son's presence once raged. Even chaos was silent on the matter. The ruinous powers, once so boastful of their corruption, no longer whispered Horus's name. It was as though the Warmaster had stepped outside the boundaries of reality itself. The Emperor sent his consciousness further, diving through the etheric tides, past the echo of demons and the cries of psychers, into the deep void beyond the warp's madness. And there, in the uncharted dark, he felt it, a presence that was not of chaos, not of the warp, but of something utterly alien. It was precise, cold, logical, the psychic equivalent of machinery grinding in perfect rhythm. It did not belong, yet it existed everywhere, moving quietly through the galaxy, cutting lines of silence into the fabric of reality. He withdrew abruptly, pain tearing through his mind. The machine that sustained his withered body shuddered as sparks of golden energy erupted from its core. Servitors scrambled to stabilize the system, chanting hymns and code prayers. The custodians tightened their grip on halberds, watching as their god twitched beneath the endless cables. No one dared speak. The Emperor understood. His son had found the one power that existed beyond the warp, a power that did not rely on gods, emotions, or souls, only logic, machine, and eternity. The Necron in the echoing darkness of the throne chamber. A faint tremor ran through the marble floor. The Mechanicum priests attending the golden throne looked up in confusion as readings on their sacred instruments flickered erratically. The Astronomicon pulsed unevenly, sending ripples of uncertainty through the fleets of the Imperium. Entire relay stations reported psychic dead zones, vast stretches of the galaxy where no astropathic message could travel. The Emperor's mind recoiled from the truth. This silence was not random. It was spreading. A deliberate pattern. A strategy. Horus was not conquering worlds through blood and fire as he had before. He was erasing them from the psychic map entirely, cutting them away from the Emperor's reach. Each fallen world was one less prayer he could hear, one less soul bound to his light. Horus had learned the perfect way to wound his father, not through rebellion, but through silence. The psychic vision rippled again. The Emperor saw flashes of cities dimming under green light, human minds turning cold and mechanical as Necron influence spread. The very faith that sustained his divinity was being stripped away piece by piece. He saw priests kneeling before altars, their prayers meeting nothing but static. He saw psychers clutching their skulls in agony as their powers failed. The warp screamed, not in rage but in confusion. The Emperor reached out one final time, straining his will across the dying light of the galaxy, seeking the faintest spark of his son's soul. There was nothing. Only a whisper, mechanical, empty, yet somehow familiar. I am free of you. That voice echoed across the golden throne like a death knell. The Emperor's halo dimmed. His attendants fell to their knees, mistaking the faltering light for divine wrath. But it was not wrath. It was grief, grief sharper than any blade. For in that moment, he understood that Horus had not fallen to corruption. He had risen above it. He had become something beyond his father's comprehension, beyond chaos, beyond godhood. His greatest son lived again, and this time, no god, no demon, no power in the warp could stop him. Horus had found a way to kill faith itself. And for the first time in 10 millennia, the Emperor of mankind was truly afraid. In the cold dark between stars, Horus stood upon the deck of a Necron tomb ship, its interior a cathedral of living metal and impossible geometry. The air shimmered faintly with energies older than the stars themselves. There was no sound, no hum of engines, no whisper of life, only the perfect silence of eternity. The Warmaster, once the brightest flame of humanity's ambition, now stood as something beyond mortal or demon. His armor, once adorned with the marks of chaos, was clean, polished black metal laced with veins of green light. The eye of Horus glowed faintly across his chestplate, reborn not in corruption, but in cold order. He gazed out into the void, where a dying sun bled its last light upon a fleet of awakening tomb worlds. Dozens of colossal pyramids drifted through space like ghostly monuments, each one pulsing with silent purpose. Around him moved the Necron legions, perfect, tireless, without emotion or voice. They obeyed him not out of worship, not out of loyalty, but because he had become part of their code, written into the logic of their resurrection protocols. Horus, the one who had defied gods and betrayed his father, had now become something far more blasphemous, the mortal who learned to command the dead that defied time. The Necron overlord, his body carved from obsidian and emerald fire, stood beside him. His voice was a metallic whisper that reverberated through Horus's mind rather than his ears. "You have chosen silence, son of man," the machine being said. "You have abandoned the false gods and their war. Why seek alliance with those who have no soul?" Horus did not answer immediately. His gaze lingered on the distant image of Terra projected before him, the home he had once sought to burn, now a flickering light amid the sea of the Imperium's madness. "Because," he said at last, his voice deep, steady, and stripped of emotion, "I have seen what gods do to men. I have seen what faith does to truth." He turned to the Overlord, the green light reflecting off his scarred face. "You seek eternity through the machine. My father sought eternity through the soul. Both are prisons. But together, we can unmake them." The Necron's optic sensors flickered. The concept of unmaking eternity was incomprehensible, even to their cold logic. And yet, something within. Their code recognized purpose, a pattern emerging from chaos. "You seek to end the cycle," the Overlord said slowly. "The war of flesh and spirit." Horus's lips curved slightly, though there was no warmth in the gesture. "I seek silence, the kind even gods cannot break." As he spoke, the holographic image of the galaxy before them began to fracture. Green grids spread outward, marking systems that were already cleansed, not destroyed, but erased from the warp entirely. Each world vanished from psychic memory, leaving behind only the physical husk of reality. Planets once filled with prayer, emotion, and life became cold, mechanical husks. The process was spreading exponentially. The Necron's anti-warp technology, fused with Horus's understanding of psychic warfare, was rewriting the galaxy, cutting away the very fabric that tied souls to gods. Horus stepped forward, reaching toward the projection of Terra. For a moment, the galaxy's heart pulsed faintly in golden light, the Emperor's beacon, flickering stubbornly against the encroaching dark. Horus's expression hardened. "He still clings to his illusion," he murmured. "A god who cannot die, a father who cannot let go." The Overlord's gaze followed his hand. "Then he will resist you." "Yes," Horus replied. "And in that resistance lies his end. Every moment he holds the warp together, he bleeds. Every prayer strengthens the chain that binds him. I will break it not with rebellion, but with silence." A mechanical tremor ran through the tomb ship as its systems aligned. Vast mechanical obelisks unfolded from its hull, glowing with anti-psychic energy. The stars around them dimmed as if swallowed by shadow. Horus turned, the green light of the Necrons reflecting off his armor like ghostly fire. "Begin the next awakening," he commanded. Across the galaxy, in a dozen forgotten systems, tomb worlds stirred. Dust cascaded from endless metallic halls. Sleeper constructs opened their eyes for the first time in millions of years. Entire continents shifted as monoliths rose from beneath the crust. Green energy pulsed skyward, forming invisible barriers that severed those worlds from the warp. Psychers on distant Imperial ships screamed and went silent as their minds found nothing but cold iron in place of the familiar psychic flow. The Emperor's reach grew weaker with every pulse. In the warp, the gods raged. The four powers screamed. Into the void, their realms trembling as portions of their dominion were consumed by null zones. Their demons dissipated, their voices fading into static. Yet Horus heard none of it. Their fury could not reach him now. For the first time in existence, he stood outside their influence, untouchable. Within the tomb ship, Horus closed his eyes. His mind expanded, merging with the Necron consciousness, mapping every tomb world, every fleet, every weapon of silence. He felt the galaxy as a living machine, precise, ordered, eternal. There was no hatred in him anymore, no rage, no love. Only clarity. He remembered his father's face, not as a god, but as a man. A man who had believed he could save humanity by binding it to faith and fear. "You sought to make mankind divine," Horus whispered into the void. "But I will make it free, even from you." The Necron overlord turned to him, ancient metal creaking like bones. "Then you will unmake everything." Horus opened his eyes, and in them burned a reflection of the dying sun. So be it. Outside, the galaxy continued to darken. Fleets vanished into blackness. Imperial worlds went silent one by one, and the light of the Astronomicon flickered weaker than ever. In the heart of Terra, the Emperor stirred, feeling the approach of something he could not name. And far beyond, amidst the endless cold of the void, Horus stood upon the bridge of the tomb ship, the Warmaster reborn as the architect of silence, the end of gods, the death of faith, and the first true peace the galaxy would ever know. In the depths of the warp, where madness and divinity entwine, the Emperor felt the first true fracture of his dominion. For 10,000 years, his will had bound the immaterium to order, holding back the infinite tides of chaos through sheer force of faith and agony. Every prayer, every sacrifice, every whispered devotion had fed his eternal fire. But now that fire was flickering. Somewhere in the heart of the psychic storm, his light met resistance, not from demons, but from absence. The silence that had begun to creep through the galaxy now bled into the warp itself. It was a void that devoured meaning, a presence that erased not by destruction, but by unmaking. The chaos gods, once roaring in endless ecstasy, began to falter. Their realms twisted and dimmed, their demons dissolving like smoke under sunlight. The Emperor watched, and though they were his enemies, he felt the weight of dread settle upon his spirit. Something was erasing them, and if they could fall, so too could he dot through the shifting storms of psychic fire. He reached outward, searching for the source. What he saw was impossible. The warp, once infinite, alive, screaming, now had scars. Lines of unnatural geometry burned through it, perfect and merciless, like blades cutting through flesh. And through those lines, he felt the cold pulse of the Necrons, the same soulless presence that had haunted the galaxy before humanity had ever walked upright. But now their energy had fused with something far more dangerous, the will of Horus. The Emperor's perception tore across the void, piercing reality and unreality alike. He saw Horus as he had never seen him, a creature of pure control, surrounded by the silent armies of the undying. No chaos corruption, no psychic presence, only perfect stillness. Horus stood in the heart of the storm, untouched by the gods, radiating the same energy as the Necron's living metal. His essence was no longer bound to the Imperium. He was beyond the reach of both faith and corruption. And as the Emperor watched, Horus turned his gaze upward, not toward the stars, but directly into the Emperor's awareness. For a moment, their eyes met across dimensions, father and son, god and rebel. No words passed between them, yet the meaning was undeniable. Horus's eyes glowed faintly green, and in that light the Emperor saw his own reflection, hollow, trapped, desperate. Then the connection broke, and the silence deepened. The Emperor's chamber trembled. Golden light flickered from his armor as the psychic machinery of the Golden Throne spasmed under the strain of maintaining the Astronomicon. Servitors shrieked in binary prayer. Custodians gripped their halberds tightly as bolts of energy cracked across the chamber floor. For the first time in 10 millennia, the Emperor's body twitched, his gaunt hand tightening upon the armrest of his throne. The weight of realization struck him like a blade. Horus was no longer an echo of chaos. He was something entirely new, a bridge between machine and soul, a being untouched by the warp's laws. He had learned to erase not only life but divinity. Every psychic being, every demon, every god derived power from the same source, belief. And belief could be silenced. The Emperor reached outward once more. His consciousness spreading across the crumbling warp, he felt the terror of dying gods, Khorne's rivers of blood turning to dust, Tzeentch's labyrinth collapsing into static, Nurgle's gardens withering into sterile frost, Slaanesh's endless cries fading into silence. The Chaos Gods were being starved, cut off from their worshippers as Horus's anti-warp zone spread. The Emperor understood now that Horus was not waging a war of conquest. He was waging a war of meaning on the psychic plane. The Emperor manifested as a towering golden figure, his halo cracked, his wings of light dimming. Around him, the last remnants of loyal psychic entities, saints, martyrs, and ancient spirits of faith rallied to defend the shrinking light of humanity. But for every soul that joined him, 1,000 others vanished into the cold nothing that spread from Horus's advance. Then came the whispers, the voices of dying gods fading like echoes in a collapsing cave. "You cannot stop it," hissed a voice that might once have been Tzeentch. "Your son has unmade belief." Another voice, low and broken, rumbled from the void, perhaps Khorne or something older. "He is the stillness between our wars, the silence between screams." The Emperor's golden light flared, rage and sorrow entwined. "He is my son," he thundered into the dying storm. "He is mine to redeem." And somewhere beyond all of it, Horus watched, not with hatred, not with love, but with cold, absolute purpose. His fleets of Necron tomb ships drifted through dead systems, leaving behind worlds of silence and glass. Cities still stood, but without souls. Monuments still glowed, but without worship. Humanity remained, but empty, hollow, cut off from the gods that had both blessed and cursed them. The Emperor's fury burned hotter. His will lashed out through the Imperium, tearing open rifts of light, trying to reignite faith in the hearts of the faithful. For a moment he succeeded, a spark, a flicker, a chant that echoed across 10,000 worlds. But then came the counterstrike. The green light spread like fire through the void, devouring the spark before it could grow. The Emperor recoiled, feeling his strength drain as the Necron technology, fused with Horus's will, suppressed even the concept of belief. He was meant to save them. Outside the Golden Throne, Terra burned with golden twilight, unaware that its god was fading, and that the universe beyond was already falling into the stillness of Horus's new order. The galaxy had grown eerily still. Where once the screams of the dying and the roar of fleets had filled the void, now there was only silence, vast, suffocating, and absolute. The Imperium's worlds, once blazing with devotion, now flickered like dying embers in an ocean of black. The Emperor's light, dimmed and fractured, struggled to reach even the closest systems. Entire sectors had gone dark, their prayers unanswered, their souls unreachable. And amidst that stillness, something ancient stirred far beyond the reach of Imperial sight. The Necron dynasties awakened in perfect sequence. Tomb worlds that had slumbered for millions of years now pulsed with green life. Metallic armies marched beneath the surface of forgotten planets, their movements precise and wordless. The void sang with the hum of resurrection protocols, a symphony of order rising from the corpse of chaos. At their head stood Horus, reborn not as a son of the Emperor, nor as a servant of chaos, but as the will of silence itself. He watched as a dying Imperial world burned below, its cathedrals crumbling under invisible pressure, its sky fractured by collapsing psychic fields. The once blazing banners of the Imperium lay in ruins, trampled into dust. Horus's ship hovered in orbit above, cloaked in the green haze of Necron energy. No bombardments, no invasions. Just silence spreading like infection. The world's faith dissolved first, then its mind, and finally its soul. Within hours it was nothing but stone and steel. Horus stood before a great viewing port, his reflection distorted in the glass, half human, half machine. The once familiar red of his eyes was gone. Now they glowed faintly with the sterile light of Necron energy. His voice, when he spoke, was calm, almost gentle. "The age of gods has ended," he said to no one in particular, "and the age of silence begins." Behind him, Necron lords assembled, towering metallic figures crowned with green flame, their eyes unblinking. They awaited his command, though none spoke. Words were unnecessary. They shared thought and purpose, a unity that no mortal or demon could comprehend. To them, Horus was not a master, but an equation completed, a variable that had given their order a new form of destiny. Across the galaxy, the Mechanicus felt the first tremors. On Mars, the great forges flickered, and the Omnissiah's symbol dimmed. Tech priests screamed in confusion as their machine spirits fell silent, their sacred chants returning no resonance. Data streams froze mid-transmission. Prayers to the machine god went unanswered. Deep within the red planet, a voice, cold, metallic, but unmistakably human, echoed through the network. "Your god is a corpse of code." Panic spread like wildfire. Fleets across the Segmentum Solar lost contact. Astropaths died by the thousands, their minds shattered by psychic silence. Imperial commanders issued desperate orders that were never received. In the span of days, entire systems became blind, deaf, and alone. And then came the visions. Across surviving worlds, dreams of a figure standing beneath a green sun plagued the minds of billions. A man of impossible calm, his face both known and unknown, whispering words they could not remember upon waking. But every dream carried the same aftermath, an overwhelming sense of peace, of finality, as if the dreamer had glimpsed the end of all suffering. Many took their own lives, believing they had been blessed. The Emperor felt every death as a shudder through his being. Bound to the golden throne, his withered body convulsed as psychic shockwaves rippled through him. His mind reached outward, but found nothing, no prayers, no devotion. Only the void of Horus's silence pressing inward like a tide. The Astronomican's beam flickered, dimming to a thin, wavering line barely reaching the outer edges of soul. Within the warp, the dying echoes of chaos gods screamed into the dark. Their thrones trembled as belief, the lifeblood of their existence, drained away. The realms that had once been infinite in violence and desire now cracked, turning to dust beneath the mechanical geometry of the Necron influence. Even the warp storms began to settle, the once turbulent sea flattening into lifeless stillness. On one of the last living shrine worlds, a lone priest knelt before a fractured statue of the Emperor. Around him, the sky wept ash and fire. He whispered a prayer, though he no longer felt its meaning. "Father of mankind, hear me." The words fell flat, hollow, unanswered. Then, as he raised his eyes, he saw it, a vast shadow descending from the heavens, framed in green light. The Warmaster had come. Horus descended upon the dead world like a god of iron and order. No army accompanied him. None was needed. As he walked through the ruins, the silence followed. Flames dimmed, air stilled, and the faint echo of warp energy bled away. When he reached the broken statue, he looked down at the kneeling priest, the last voice of faith on this world. "Your God cannot hear you," Horus said softly. The priest trembled, tears streaking through the dust on his face. He will return," he whispered. "He always does." Horus knelt, lowering his head until his glowing eyes met the man's. "He will," Horus said. "But when he does, he will find nothing left to save." With a touch, Horus silenced the man's mind, not through death, but through erasure. The priest's eyes glazed over, his body still kneeling, but his soul gone. All around, the world fell quiet. The final echo of prayer faded. Somewhere in the void, Horus turned from the dead planet. His gaze fixed on the distant glow of Terra. The Necron fleet shifted around him, forming a silent constellation of death and logic. The path ahead was clear. The Father had made the Imperium eternal through faith. The Son would end eternity through silence. The stars themselves seemed to hold their breath. Across the void, even light felt hesitant, dimming before the advancing shadow that consumed systems whole. The silence that Horus had unleashed spread faster than any plague, faster than war itself. It was not destruction that he brought, but erasure, the quiet removal of meaning. The Imperium, once a monolithic empire of devotion and fear, now fractured under the unbearable weight of nothingness. On Terra, the High Lords whispered in panic. Vox networks had gone dead, astropathic choirs silenced, and the great machinery of the Imperium sputtered like a dying flame. Some prayed to the Emperor. Others plotted in desperation, hoping to seize some fragment of control before it was too late. But in truth, none of them could comprehend what was happening. How do you fight an enemy that brings no armies, no chaos, no corruption, only silence? On the outer rim, entire fleets vanished without a sound. Ships found adrift had no signs of battle, just empty hulls, silent engines, and crew members turned to statues of pale stone. Their eyes were open, as if frozen mid-thought, mid-prayer. Inquisitors who investigated these vessels were driven, mad by the stillness within, a silence so deep it screamed inside their skulls. Many took their own lives after one glimpse. The reports that reached Terra were few, fragmented, and unbelievable. The Imperium's heart began to falter. Horus had become a ghost story, even among the stars. Some said he had returned as vengeance incarnate. Others claimed he was a machine god unchained, the true heir of the Necrontyr. But no one could confirm it, because every witness vanished soon after speaking his name. Across hundreds of systems, Imperial citizens began hearing whispers during their sleep. The same words, the same tone, always the same calm. Sleep, the war is over. And one by one, they obeyed. Entire hive cities went still overnight. Billions of souls lay in perfect formation, as if frozen mid-dream. The administratum called it mass psychosis. The ecclesiarchy called it heresy. But deep within the warp, the gods of chaos howled in fear, for every silent world meant one less voice to feed them. The immaterium itself began to wither, its once roaring storms flattening into dead calm. Even the demons felt it, the slow starvation of faith. Aboard his command vessel, Horus watched the unfolding silence through a holographic projection of the galaxy. Every glowing mark, every human soul connected to the Emperor, was flickering out, one by one. His expression did not change. "They built an empire from worship," he murmured. Now they will learn the price of devotion. The Necron lords around him made no sound, their metallic faces reflecting the green light of dying stars. To them, this was the fulfillment of prophecy, the galaxy's return to order, logic, and deathless calm. But to Horus, it was something far more personal. Each extinguished soul was a piece of the Emperor's dominion dying, a memory erased from the great dream of humanity. On one distant moon, an Imperial commander recorded his final message before communication ceased. We prayed. We fought. We burned our faith into the stars. But he does not answer anymore. The light is gone. The darkness. It isn't coming. It's already here, and it is quiet. When the Emperor heard that last fading echo through the psychic veil, he tried to reach out, his mind stretching across the crumbling warp, his soul straining against millennia of imprisonment. But where once he felt the storm of humanity's will, now there was only a cold void. His children, billions of them, were asleep in deathless peace. Horus had given them what they had always begged for. Released out in the depths of the void, the Warmaster closed his eyes. He saw Terra, still shining, still stubborn, still alive, and he knew the end was near. The Imperium would not fall through war. It would fade into silence, forgotten even by the gods that had damned it. The Emperor's dream had been to save mankind through faith. Horus's vision was to free it through oblivion. The final war of silence had begun, not with fleets or fire, but with the slow extinction of belief itself. The galaxy, once a furnace of devotion and heresy, now cooled into shadow. And in that shadow, Horus smiled, not as a traitor, not as a son, but as the last true savior of a species that could no longer bear its own prayers. There was no warning, no grand declaration of war, no final ultimatum. Only the quiet hum of machinery and the distant flicker of dying stars. The last remnants of the Imperium stood trembling before the inevitable. For millennia, humanity had believed in the Emperor's eternal light, but now even that faith had dimmed to a fragile ember. Terra, once the heart of mankind's dominion, was a planet wrapped in prayer and paranoia. Billions of souls crowded in its decaying hives, whispering his name into the choking smog, praying for deliverance that would never come. The Astronomicon, once blazing across the warp like a beacon of divine fury, now pulsed weakly, its light no longer reaching the outer sectors. Imperial fleets, once the pride of the Emperor's will, drifted in orbit like ghosts, waiting for orders that never arrived. The High Lords of Terra sat in their marble halls, arguing as if words could shield them from oblivion. Some demanded faith, others surrender, but all were united by fear. And then, silence. The moment came without fanfare. Vox channels went dead, astropathic relays imploded, and across Terra, the prayers stopped mid-sentence. People froze, sensing something vast and terrible had arrived. Above the clouds, a shadow eclipsed the sun, a figure wrapped in radiant green and black energy, descending through the poisoned skies. The Warmaster had returned. Horus stepped onto Terra not as a conqueror, but as a herald of the end. His armor was a fusion of ancient ceramite and necrodermis, each plate pulsing with a mechanical heartbeat. His face was calm, almost mournful, as he looked upon the cradle of mankind, the place where everything began and where everything would end. The Necron fleet hung silently above, forming a perfect geometric array, their emerald lights reflecting off the planet's surface like constellations of death. On the surface, the ground trembled as the first wave of silence spread outward. Entire hive blocks ceased movement, machines halted mid-cycle, engines went cold, and the endless chants of the ecclesiarchy choked into nothing. It was not death in the mortal sense. It was a stillness deeper than death, a return to order. The psychic noise of humanity, the collective chaos of emotion, faith, and sin, was being erased, rewritten by the logic of the Necrons and the will of Horus. In the Imperial Palace, Thunder echoed through the ancient stone. Custodians and Sisters of Silence stood ready, their faces expressionless, but their hands trembling on their weapons. They had felt this presence before, long ago, at the dawn of the heresy. But now it was different. There was no rage, no pride, no hate. Only inevitability. As Horus entered the outer sanctum, the palace walls began to hum with green light. The ancient runes of protection, powered by the Emperor's will, flickered and died one by one. Custodians fell to their knees, not out of defeat, but awe. The air grew heavy, time itself seemed to slow. In the silence that followed, Horus spoke, his voice neither loud nor soft, but absolute. "Father," he said, "I have come home." The Emperor's psychic essence, barely holding itself together on the throne, flared like a dying star. His mind reached through the palace, touching Horus's. In that instant, millennia of war and pain collided. Father and son, savior and destroyer, bound by a single tragedy, love twisted by faith. The Emperor's voice echoed through every mind on Terra. "My son, what have you done?" Horus looked upon him, his expression unreadable. "What you could not," he replied. "I have freed them." The golden throne trembled. Lightning, both psychic and divine, tore through the walls. The warp roared, then fell silent. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Emperor tried to rise, his skeletal form moving, his light burning through the bindings of his eternal prison. But every step forward was met with the crushing stillness of Horus's presence. The two forces collided, the burning light of faith and the cold perfection of silence. The clash was not seen, but felt. Across the galaxy, the last living humans looked to the sky as storms of gold and green tore through the heavens. Stars flickered, planets split, and the warp shuddered as if reality itself could not bear their reunion. The Chaos Gods screamed in agony, their realms collapsing into ash, their essence dissolving into nothing. In that moment, the Immaterium began to die. The Emperor's hand, radiant and trembling, reached out toward him. Gold met metal. Light met void. For a heartbeat, the galaxy froze. And then, everything went black. When the silence cleared, the Necron fleets were gone. The warp was still. Terra stood untouched, but the Astronomicon was dark. The golden throne sat empty. No Emperor. No Warmaster. Only a lingering light that neither faded nor grew, eternal equilibrium. And in that fragile quiet, humanity finally slept. The galaxy had gone quiet. Not the peace of victory, nor the stillness of death, but something deeper. Something absolute. In the absence of chaos and the Emperor's light, existence itself seemed to hold its breath. Stars no longer flared with divine fury. The warp no longer howled. The great storms that had raged for millennia were gone, leaving behind an impossible calm. It was the silence of a creation that no longer knew why it existed. On Terra, the sky was a dull gold gray, the last remnants of the Astronomicon's glow hanging like fading embers. The once loud world of mankind's empire had become a tomb. Great cathedrals stood untouched, their bells motionless, their candles unlit. Millions knelt in the streets, not dead, not alive, simply still, their bodies frozen in the echo of their last prayer. No wind stirred, no machinery hummed. The heart of the Imperium had stopped beating. In the throne room, the golden throne lay silent. Its machinery, once thunderous and holy, no longer pulsed with psychic energy. The cables that had fed upon the Emperor's essence hung lifeless, their glow extinguished. Upon the throne sat no god, no corpse, only empty armor, gilded and cracked, with faint traces of ash drifting from the air around it. And yet, in the void between moments, something watched. Not the Emperor as he was known, not the Warmaster, not even the Necron mind that had fueled this quiet apocalypse. It was something new, something born of both light and silence. It had no body, no voice, no name. It was the sum of all that had been lost, every prayer unanswered, every soul that had ever whispered into the dark. The universe had not died. It had simply exhaled. Far beyond Terra, the last human colonies floated in eerie tranquility. On one world, a child stared at the sky, where once the Astronomican's beam had burned like fire. Now it was just blackness, deep and endless. Her mother whispered stories of gods and heroes, though even she no longer believed them. The names, Emperor, Horus, Imperium, had become strange sounds, relics of a forgotten dream. In the ruins of Mars, the once glorious forge world was nothing more than cold metal and dust. The red planet had turned gray. Machine temples stood silent, their priests now statues of carbon and steel. Deep beneath the surface, the sacred cogitators still blinked weakly, endlessly repeating the same corrupted mantra, "The Omnissiah sleeps." In the void where the warp once raged, a single fragment of light moved. It drifted through the remnants of immaterium like a spark refusing to die. It carried with it a memory, not of war or glory, but of hope. The faint image of a man sitting upon a golden throne and another kneeling before him. Father and son, bound by the ruin of their choices. The spark flickered, as if remembering warmth, and then vanished into the black. The silence shuddered. In that instant, across the galaxy, something stirred. The warp, empty and dormant, rippled faintly. The ashes of chaos twisted like dying embers. The void trembled, as if the universe itself remembered that it was not meant to be quiet, that it was not meant to end. And somewhere within that stirring, a voice spoke, soft, broken, but alive. "My son." No one heard it, but the stars did. The dead constellations flickered once, like eyes opening after a long sleep. The silence cracked, ever so slightly. And through that crack came the faintest whisper of life, not divine, not mechanical, but human. On a distant world, a child cried for the first time in a century. The sound echoed through her home, and her mother wept without knowing why. The world did not awaken fully, but it remembered. One cry became 2, then 10, then 100. The silence, once perfect, began to fracture. In the nothingness beyond time, 2 figures stood, the Emperor and Horus, their forms reduced to silhouettes of light and shadow. They did not speak, for there were no words left to say. But between them, a new dawn flickered, not of faith, not of power, but of understanding. Horus looked upon his father, his expression no longer defiant, no longer sorrowful, simply at peace. The Emperor's gaze softened, and for the first time in eternity, he smiled. There was no victory, no forgiveness, no resurrection, only a quiet acknowledgement of what they had both become. And as they faded into the void, the faint echo of their bond lingered, a resonance that spread across creation like the first note of a forgotten song. It touched the stars, the ruins, the dead machines, and somewhere deep in the warp, light returned. Not bright, not pure, but alive. And though the Imperium was gone, though its faith and fury had burned to ash, something eternal remained, the will to endure. The galaxy was silent no longer. In the last echo of the galaxy's breath, everything felt still. The Imperium, that titanic monument to devotion and madness, had become a mausoleum. Worlds that once burned with faith now floated in silence, orbiting cold suns. The banners of the double-headed eagle hung in tatters across empty cathedrals, whispering softly in the void's faint winds. There was no war now, no chaos, no prayer, only the echoes of what once was. The galaxy had survived the storm, but at a cost so immense that survival itself felt like defeat. Horus' rebellion, his alliance with the Necrons, and the Emperor's final fall had not destroyed mankind outright. Instead, they hollowed it. What remained was not life, but a shadow of existence, an afterimage of humanity, drifting through the ruins of its own faith. The warp, once screaming with the pain and madness of trillions, had gone eerily quiet. The gods were silent, their thrones empty, their laughter gone. Even the great Necron dynasties, once awakened in cold purpose, had withdrawn into the endless black, their task complete, order restored through stillness. Logic imposed upon chaos by the ultimate sacrifice, the death of will. And yet, even in this silence, something persisted. Deep within the ruins of Holy Terra, beneath layers of ash and forgotten stone, the golden throne still stood, empty, broken, but humming faintly. Within that faint pulse of dying machinery, there was something more than decay. The echo of a voice. Not the Emperor's command, but something weaker, more human. A whisper that drifted through the quiet halls like a memory. It said nothing of empire, or conquest, or faith, only of forgiveness. Horus' shadow lingered in that whisper. His final act, the merging of human will with Necron precision, had done more than end the Imperium. It had created a fragile balance, a new stillness in which the galaxy could, perhaps, heal. But the price was the death of everything that gave humanity its fire. Billions prayed once to the Emperor's name. Now no one remembered it. They lived without fear, without war, but also without dreams. It was peace in its most terrifying form, a galaxy frozen in eternal quiet. Far from Terra, the stars themselves seemed to dim, not from age but from disinterest. Systems that once teemed with life now glowed faintly under the light of dying suns. The Mechanicus had become extinct. Their machines continued their routines, cleaning and repairing structures for masters who would never return. The ecclesiarchy's grand sermons had turned to dust, their hymns reduced to the faint hum of wind through cracked vox horns. Humanity's greatest achievements were now monuments of futility, cathedrals to silence. But even the end is not truly the end. Deep within one of those lifeless worlds, in a forgotten hive where rusted statues of saints watched over empty streets, a single child awoke from sleep, gasping, afraid. She had dreamed of light, of something vast and golden stirring beneath the surface of Terra. She didn't understand what it was, but she felt warmth for the first time in generations. She looked at the stars through a broken window, and one of them, just one, flickered. That single flicker was enough. Enough to suggest that something was moving again in the void. A breath, a heartbeat, a spark of resistance in the suffocating stillness. The galaxy, though broken, still held memory. The Necron's perfect logic, the Emperor's sacrifice, Horus' rebellion, all were threads in a tapestry that refused to unravel completely. And so, from that spark, stories began again. The kind that whispered in the dark corners of dying worlds, tales of a golden figure returning, of a brother reborn, of forgotten angels stirring beneath the ash. Perhaps they were lies. Perhaps they were only echoes of the past. But in a universe where even gods had grown silent, stories became sacred once more. The galaxy did not end in fire or glory, but in something more haunting, a quiet that waited to be broken, a silence that demanded a new voice. Somewhere, beyond the edge of known stars, where the void itself shimmered faintly, that voice began to form. Whether it was human, machine, or something else entirely, none could say. But the universe, once again, had begun to listen. In the cold afterglow of the Imperium's final silence, the galaxy began to remember what it meant to dream. For the first time in 10,000 years, no one prayed, not because of faith, but because there was no one left to hear. The Emperor's name was gone from every tongue, his sigil erased from every world. Yet, in that emptiness, something ancient stirred, not divine, not mechanical, but deeply human. From the ruins of once glorious hive cities, scattered survivors began to wander. They were not soldiers, not priests, not zealots, merely fragments of what once was. They carried no banners, no weapons, only fragments of memory and instinct. They whispered old stories by firelight, myths of a golden man who had once defied gods, and a warrior who had turned against him not out of hate, but out of sorrow. Those whispers spread, carried from world to world by the drifting remnants of humankind. The Necro silence that had suffocated the galaxy was beginning to crack. For all their logic, their cold perfection, they had not accounted for one truth: humanity's disease of imagination. The perfect stillness they had created was slowly being undone by dreams. Children born in the void began to draw suns where none existed. Machine spirits, long dormant, flickered with inexplicable warmth. Even the stars, long muted under Necron suppression fields, began to shimmer faintly, as if remembering the songs of old navigators. Horus Act, merging with Necron code, rewriting the balance between flesh and machine, had left a scar in reality. It was not destruction, but a seed. That seed had waited in silence, dormant, until the weight of perfection became unbearable. Now as the galaxy stirred, it began to awaken. It pulsed in the warp's quiet corpse, a single heartbeat in the vast dark. Not chaos, not faith, but rebirth. On one forgotten moon orbiting the dead world of Mars, a solitary figure moved through the dust, wrapped in a cloak of old ceramite, carrying a faintly glowing staff. His face was hidden, but his eyes shone like molten gold. Around him, half-buried titans and rusted forges began to hum as he passed, their machine spirits responding to something older than command codes: recognition. Some said it was the return of the Emperor. Others whispered it was the final echo of Horus, returned not to conquer, but to forgive. The figure reached the center of a collapsed Mechanicus temple, where the sigil of the Omnicia lay shattered in two. He placed his hand upon it, and light erupted from the ground, red, then gold, then pure white. Across the system, dormant satellites flared to life, transmitting signals long thought extinct. On distant planets, ancient data vaults began unlocking, revealing lost knowledge, forgotten truths, and the histories that the Imperium had buried in fear. Humanity was remembering itself, but not everyone welcomed this awakening. Across the darkened galaxy, the remaining Necron overlords watched with cold disapproval. They had promised order, a silent, perfect eternity. What they now saw was chaos reborn, emotion returning, entropy blooming once more. Their fleets stirred. Their tomb worlds began to pulse. Yet even they hesitated. In the stillness of their metal minds, some part of them, the faint memory of life, was curious. Could there be beauty in imperfection? The warp began to breathe again. Slowly, faintly. It did not scream this time, it sighed. Its surface rippled with strange light, neither demonic nor divine, as if the galaxy itself was drawing its first breath after an age of suffocation. The souls of the dead whispered across it, not in agony, but in remembrance. They were the echoes of every soldier, every saint, every lost child of mankind, all flowing together into something new, something UNNAMEABLE. And in that moment, the child from Terra's ruins, the one who had seen the flickering star, looked again to the sky. This time, the stars were not dying. They were being born. Constellations shifted. Golden light pierced the dark, weaving new patterns across the heavens. The universe was not ending, after all. It was resetting. Not into order, not into war, but into something in between, fragile, uncertain, but alive. The galaxy had gone through gods, machines, and madness. It had burned, frozen, and fallen into silence. And yet, against all logic, against all endings, it found a way to begin again, somewhere. Between the hum of awakening machinery and the first cry of a newborn under a new sun, a voice, neither Emperor nor Horus, whispered through the void. Perhaps this is what we were meant to become, not rulers, not saviors, but survivors. And so, beneath the sky of reborn stars, humanity, small, imperfect, and infinite, took its first steps into a new age. Not of Imperium, not of empire, but of quiet, endless possibility. In the endless dark that followed rebirth, the galaxy was quiet, not the silence of death, but the kind that comes before the first heartbeat of something new. The Imperium was gone, its name spoken only in the drifting memories of stars, but humanity endured. Not as conquerors, not as zealots, but as wanderers in a cosmos that no longer knew them. The golden throne lay in ruins, buried under centuries of ash and time. Its cables were cold, its conduits broken, yet somewhere deep beneath that tomb of light, a flicker still pulsed, faint, stubborn, defiant. It was not the Emperor's will, nor Horus' wrath, but the remnant of a promise neither could keep, that humanity would never truly die. From that pulse came whispers, faint as wind over glass, reaching across the void. They drifted through the ruins of dead worlds and into the dreams of survivors scattered across the stars. Those dreams were strange, visions of golden fire reborn, of a galaxy turning its gaze once again toward Terra, of a throne that did not demand worship, but remembrance. Men and women awoke weeping without knowing why, their hearts filled with a nostalgia for something they had never seen. Children were born who spoke the Emperor's tongue, though no one had taught it. And among the drifting fleets of the forgotten, lights began to ignite one by one, old ships reawakening. Guided by instinct more than reason, across the void, the Necrons observed this resurgence with silent fascination. Their dynasties, long devoted to control and order, had begun to fracture. Some rulers, ancient beyond comprehension, simply shut down, retreating into sleep rather than face the truth that imperfection could not be erased. Others watched humanity's rebirth with curiosity. They saw in man's stubbornness something that no machine could replicate, a will to exist even when reason dictated otherwise. And in some unthinkable corners of the galaxy, Necrons began to protect human enclaves, not as masters, but as silent guardians, unsure of why they did so. The warp too was changing. It no longer screamed or howled. Instead, it shimmered faintly with forgotten colors. The old gods of blood, decay, excess, and change were gone, dissolved into the emptiness they once ruled. In their place rose something formless, something human. The dreams of countless souls had shaped a new psychic pattern, not divine, not infernal, but alive. It was a collective will, fragile and luminous, born from the remnants of love, sorrow, and memory. The galaxy had found a new balance, not of order or chaos, but of quiet harmony between both. And from that harmony, something unexpected began. On a small, unnamed world far beyond the reach of any star map, a new city was being built. Its walls were simple stone, its towers unadorned, and yet its foundations pulsed faintly with golden light. There were no banners, no titles, no gods, only people working side by side beneath a crimson and gold sky. They did not call it the Imperium. They called it the beginning. Among them walked a man whose face none remembered clearly. His eyes carried both sorrow and peace, his voice calm, his presence immense. Some believed he was the Emperor reborn. Others thought he was Horus redeemed. But the truth didn't matter. What mattered was that, in his presence, people believed again, not in gods or empires, but in themselves. And across the stars, other lights began to flicker, small settlements rising among ruins, ships reconnecting through forgotten channels, machines humming once more. The galaxy, scarred and ancient, was healing in its own strange way. Even the stars seemed to burn brighter, as if celebrating quietly. In time, the myths would return, but changed. The Emperor would no longer be a god, but a teacher. Horus would no longer be a betrayer, but a warning. The age of Imperium would become a legend, not of war, but of what happens when faith consumes reason. Humanity, fragile and eternal, would step into this new dawn carrying both its sins and its dreams. And as the first sunrise of the new age spread across Terra's broken surface, golden light spilling through the cracks of the ruined palace, a single voice, neither divine nor human, whispered across the galaxy, "The Imperium has ended. But humanity endures." The stars answered, one by one, with a soft, steady glow. The long night was over. The silence had finally learned to sing.